It was 2013. I had decided to take a solo troop into a forest a few hours from my home, one so remote it barely even showed up properly on maps. Hidden somewhere in that forest was a small fire lookout tower that had been abandoned years ago. Some people online claimed it was still standing, but the most recent post I could find was nearly a decade old. I had no idea what to expect out there, and somehow that uncertainty gnawed at me even before I arrived. I parked my car on the side of a dirt road, slung my 4 days' worth of camping gear over my back, and started hiking into the woods. There was no real trail in this part of the forest. Every step was the crunch of dry branches or the earthy smell of crushed moss. Without my GPS, I would have been hopelessly lost. As the hours passed, the trees grew denser, the ground rougher, and the air quieter. Eventually, I found myself wishing I couldn't hear my own footsteps, because it was becoming painfully obvious that I wasn't alone. Even the silence of the forest felt loud enough to set my nerves on edge. Finally, it appeared through the treetops. The lookout tower. Its roof reflected the sun in a dull shimmer, but the tower itself rose from the forest like a black, rotten tooth. The paint was peeling, the metal beams rusted, yet it was somehow still standing. The first creak of the staircase beneath my foot sounded like a coffin lid cracking open. But when I reached the top, the view, it was endless. Miles of nothing. No roads, no cabins, no lights, just me and a vast, deep emptiness. Strangely enough, that isolation felt peaceful. I went inside, unpacked, heated some food, set up my things. After sunset, I climbed onto the roof. The sky was a murky glow behind drifting clouds, turning the world into a landscape made only of shadows. The breeze was gentle, but every time the tower groaned under it, a growing dread twisted in my stomach. Past midnight, just as I was about to head back inside, I saw a light between the trees. But it wasn't a flashlight. It was orange, flickering, like some kind of ancient torch. The most unnerving part was that it wasn't moving randomly. It looked like it was searching or heading somewhere with purpose. Toward the tower. A chill crawled up my spine, but I tried to reassure myself that it was too dark for anyone to see me. The light would vanish for a few seconds, then reappear. I watched it for minutes, and then, suddenly, it went out. Completely. Just when I started to relax, I looked down and saw someone standing in the clearing below, staring at the tower, motionless, not taking a single step. "Hello?" I called out, not because I expected an answer, but because the silence pressing against my ears was becoming unbearable. The figure didn't say anything. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel that his head was turned toward me. After what felt like minutes of suffocating stillness, he slowly raised an arm, as if waving or pointing. Then he turned and sprinted back into the forest. There was no light in his hand anymore. No flashlight, no torch, nothing. I tried to convince myself he was just another camper, but something deep in me whispered that the person I saw was not normal. I crawled into my sleeping bag, but the groaning beams, the rattling rotten window frames, the faint cracks echoing inside, none of it let me sleep. Eventually, exhaustion won. I awoke to a sound. Metal, creaking, footsteps on the staircase. At first I told myself it was the wind, forced myself to believe it, but then it came again and again. Someone was climbing the stairs. The steps weren't slow, they were hurried, urgent, like something trying to get somewhere, trying to get to me. I threw off my sleeping bag and stood up. In the suffocating stillness, the only sound was the tortured whining of metal. I grabbed my pack and stepped outside. The footsteps quickened. They were closer. My heartbeat felt like it was about to rip out of my chest. And then, silence. A deep, heavy, suffocating silence. I crept toward the staircase, turned the corner, no one. Leaned over the railing and looked down, nothing. But then, from behind the wall beside me, I heard rapid footsteps, followed by a dark shape rushing past the windows, too fast for any human. Without thinking, I bolted toward the stairs and started climbing down. The metal swayed, my legs shaking uncontrollably. Halfway down, I looked up. A face was staring at me from above. It had eyes, but no pupils, just pitch-black voids. I kept descending, moving only on pure survival instinct at that point. When I reached the ground, I sprinted into the forest, but then paused and glanced back. That thing was standing on the roof of the tower, watching me. I lifted my hand toward it, called out, but it didn't respond. That terrified me even more. I turned and ran again, without looking back, because some part of me knew it was still watching from the tower's peak. I followed my GPS back to the car. Even after I slammed the door shut, I was shaking. When my headlights lit up the tree line, I thought, just for a moment, that I saw two silhouettes standing side by side. But I was too terrified to look twice. I stepped on the gas. I never camped alone in a forest after that night. And whatever was staring down at me from the top of that tower, I never found out what it was.
My girlfriend and I loved spending our weekends camping deep in the Appalachian Mountains, escaping the stress of the city, work, and crowds to hide in the damp, earthy silence of the forest was our kind of therapy. We had been to this region dozens of times, but what we were about to experience would be unlike anything we had ever lived through. That morning, a light drizzle had begun, pretty normal for the mountains. Honestly, we even enjoyed that kind of weather. When we reached the entrance of the trail, there was only one car parked. The quietness actually felt nice, until my girlfriend noticed that the car's passenger door was wide open. It was fully open. Rain was pouring straight into the interior, drenching the seats, and there wasn't a single person in sight. I closed the door. "Probably just someone being careless," I said, though something deep inside whispered that something wasn't right. We stepped onto the trail and walked in. The air between the trees was heavy, as if even the wind didn't want to move. We kept talking about that open door the whole way. It made no sense for someone to leave the door of a new, expensive car wide open in a place like that. After 2 hours of muddy, exhausting hiking, we reached the campsite. In the middle, there was one small, single-person tent. Under the dark gray rain, it looked soaked, sagging, and lifeless. No sound, no light, no movement came from inside. We set up our own tent on the far side of the clearing. We ate, dried our gear, and tried to settle in until we heard muffled noises outside. Because of the rain, we couldn't make out what it was. I unzipped our tent just a little and froze. 2 men, crouched right in front of our tent, staring at us without saying a word. They were so close I could hear their breathing. Then, they smiled. They introduced themselves, said they were staying in that tiny tent in the middle and had been there for a few days. Their clothes, tight skinny jeans and thin t-shirts, not even proper hiking boots on their feet. I couldn't imagine how they had survived this rain for several days dressed like that. When they went back to their tent, both of us felt uneasy. That tent? It wasn't big enough for 2 grown men. Honestly, it didn't even look like it could withstand one night. We kept the zipper open just a little and watched them. For an hour, not a single movement. It was as if the tent was empty. When darkness finally fell, we went to sleep. Or at least I thought I did. A few hours later, I woke up needing to use the bathroom. The rain hadn't let up. I stepped out of the tent and walked a few steps behind a tree. That's when I heard a strange sound, a faint rustling cutting through the rain, like someone slowly stepping across wet leaves. I squinted into the darkness. The small tent across the clearing, its zipper was wide open, completely empty inside. It felt like the blood drained out of my body. I sprinted back to our tent and shook my girlfriend awake. Her face went pale when she heard what I said. We hadn't even decided what to do yet when we heard a rustle from behind our tent. Close, very close, like someone was dragging their hand across the fabric. We were done. We couldn't stay here another second. I grabbed my knife and told my girlfriend, pack everything, fast. The moment I stepped outside the tent, my heart nearly exploded. Between the trees, just 3 steps away, the 2 men were standing there. Their soaking yellow-blonde hair clung to their faces, their clothes were covered in mud, but their expressions completely empty. No fear, no surprise, no anger. As if they weren't even human. They stared at us without making a sound. The shadows of the trees hid part of their faces, but their eyes glowed strangely in the darkness. Their breathing was so heavy I could hear it even through the rain. At that moment, my girlfriend unzipped the tent to step out. Even that tiny zipper sound sliced through the night like a cold knife. I yelled, "Run!" And we ran. Our feet sank into mud, our breaths burned, our hearts pounded in our ears. I made the mistake of looking back. The men, they were still standing in the exact same spot, just watching. The fact that they didn't chase us was somehow more terrifying than if they had. What were they waiting for? Why didn't they move? We nearly sprinted the entire way back to the trailhead. The rain slapped against my face, and I could feel, deep in my gut, that something in the woods was still watching us. When we reached the parking area, the same car was still there, and the passenger door was open again, as if someone had rushed out in a panic or been forced out. Once we reached town, we stopped at a gas station and called the police. Even while explaining what happened, we couldn't stop shaking. A few days later, when the police called us back with their findings, my whole body went cold. The car belonged to an elderly man who had recently gone missing. All of his belongings had been taken from inside the vehicle. The small tent at the campsite had belonged to him. The man was never found, and the 2 men left no trace. Only a few irregular footprints washed away by the rain. Even today, when I think about the moment those 2 men stared at us in silence, something cold twists in my stomach. Their blank expressions, standing right behind our tent, never speaking. And that horrifying feeling, if we had waited just a little longer, we might not have made it out alive.
My close friend Mike and I have been camping together for years. We used to go more often back when we were college roommates, but now we both work full-time. Still, we made it a habit to escape into nature a few times a year. Mike was the one who got me into camping. He had been doing it since childhood. Before him, I had never spent a single night alone in the woods. This story happened 2 years ago, during a time when the summer days were scorching, but the nights were freezing. As always, we didn't go too far. After a 2-hour hike from the trail, we found a quiet, isolated spot with no people around. We set up our tents, prepared the campfire, and began our peaceful 4 to 5 day retreat. The first 3 days were absolutely perfect. The crackling fire, the silence of nature, the stars lighting up the night.
We cleared our minds and enjoyed ourselves. A few hikes, a few board games, long conversations. We were so relaxed that we didn't even notice how fast time passed. But on the fourth day, everything changed in an instant. We had decided to pack up and head back the next morning. As the sun was setting, we were preparing to light the fire again. Mike said, "I'll take a short walk and gather some dry wood." That was his routine. He had been doing it for years. I started taking out the food. But when the sun fully set, Mike still hadn't returned. At first, I didn't worry. Maybe he just wanted some fresh air. But when 30 minutes passed and he still wasn't back, a mild sense of unease crept in. Collecting wood never took this long. Another 30 minutes went by, and now it was pitch black. I turned on the big camp lantern, though I didn't want to leave it on too long in case the battery died. The trees around me looked like they were bending and twisting in the flickering light. Dark thoughts about Mike began swirling in my head. Mike was more experienced than I was at camping. Him getting lost didn't make sense. But an animal attack? That possibility terrified me. There were bears and mountain lions in this area, and Mike knew that even better than I did. He always stored food properly, but still. I thought maybe if I lit the fire, he'd see the flames and return. I gathered some wood with the lantern and lit the fire. As the orange flames rose, my eyes kept darting toward the dark forest. I kept thinking I saw something, a shadow, a movement. But every time I looked closely, nothing was there. Time kept passing. It had been 2 hours now. I didn't know what to do. Should I go look for him? What if he was too far or injured? But at the same time, what if I also got lost? Thoughts crashed around in my head, and every tiny rustle in the woods stabbed into my nerves. Then I heard a gunshot. A single shot. Short, sharp, echoing from far away. From the direction Mike had gone. What terrified me the most, neither of us had brought a gun. For a moment, everything stopped. I couldn't even hear the fire anymore. My whole body went cold. I stood there for minutes, rubbing my hands together, trying to think. Finally, I grabbed the lantern and started walking into the woods. I had taken only a few steps when footsteps came from the darkness. Fast footsteps, running. Panicking, I pointed the lantern toward the sound, but its light was weak, just a narrow beam slicing between the trees. Then I saw a silhouette. Someone running toward me. The steps pounded the ground hard. The lantern flickered. My breath caught in my throat. As the figure came closer, I realized it was Mike, but I barely recognized him. His face was ghostly pale. His eyes were open wide. His lips were trembling, his chest rising and falling rapidly, like he had been chased for miles. I had never seen a human being that terrified. "We have to go," he whispered. The desperation in his voice sent chills through me. "Now!" We ran back to the campsite. We left most of our belongings behind. We grabbed only our backpacks and sprinted toward the trail. We kept glancing over our shoulders as if something would emerge from the darkness behind us. It felt like the night itself was chasing us. When we reached the trail, Mike was still gasping for breath. He didn't say a single word until we were completely out of the woods. Those moments were so tense that the only thing I could hear was our racing heartbeats. Once we reached a safe distance, he finally spoke. He said he had encountered a man. The man had pointed a gun at him and quietly told him to follow him. Mike didn't know where the man was taking him, but he said the man was forcing him deeper into the forest. He said he found a chance to escape. When I saw him running toward me, he was still fleeing from that man. That's what Mike always said. But I've always felt he was hiding something. Especially the one question I've always been afraid to ask. That gunshot I heard?
Right after that gunshot, Mike came running to me, and the man never followed him. When you put all of that together, only one possibility remains in my mind. Maybe Mike fought the man. Maybe he took the gun. Maybe, to save himself, he had no other choice. But Mike never talks about it. Whenever I bring it up, he shuts down and changes the subject. After that night, Mike never went camping again. Neither did I. And even today, I still don't know exactly what happened in that forest. Maybe it's better that I don't know. But some nights, I swear, I can still hear that single gunshot echoing again. And I can't help wondering, who was really out there in the darkness? And how did Mike escape?